Welcome to video number 1 for Chapter 8, America Secedes from the Empire. Congress drafted George Washington. The Second Continental Congress meets in Philadelphia on May 10, 1775. This was the single most important action that they took, was to select George Washington to head the army. The choice was made with considerable misgivings because he had never risen above the rank of colonel. His largest command had numbered only 1,200. Falling short of true military genius, he would actually lose more battles than he won. He was gifted with outstanding powers of leadership and immense strength of character. He radiated patience, courage, self-discipline, and a sense of justice. He was trusted and insisted on serving without pay. He kept, however, a careful list of expenses totaling up to 100,000. The Continental Congress chose more wisely than it knew at the time. Bunker Hill and Hessian Hirelings. The War of Inconsistency was fought for 14 months, from April 1775 to July of 1776, before the fateful plunge into independence. The gradual tempo of warfare increased. By May of 1775, Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold captured garrisons at Fort Ticonderoga and Crown Point in Upper New York. By June of 1775, the colonists had seized Bunker Hill. In July of 1775, Congress had adopted the Olive Branch Petition, which professed loyalty to the Crown and begged the King to prevent further hostilities. King George III slammed the door on all hope of reconciliation, and in August of 1775 he proclaimed the colonies in open rebellion. Skirmishes were now treason, which was a hanging crime. He next hired thousands of German troops. George III needed the men to fight the war. Because most of these soldiers came from the German Principality of Hesse, Americans called all European mercenaries Hessians. News of the Hessian deal shocked the colonists. Hessian hirelings proved to be good soldiers. This is an artist rendering of the Battle of Bunker Hill in June 17, 1775. The abortive conquest of Canada. In October 1775, the British burned Falmouth, Portland, which is now Portland, Maine. In autumn, rebels undertook a two-pronged invasion of Canada. A successful assault on Canada would add a 14th colony and deprive Britain of a valuable base for striking the colonies in revolt. The invasion north was an undisguised offensive warfare. The invasion of Canada was almost successful. General Richard Montgomery captured Montreal. At Quebec, he was joined by the army of General Benedict Arnold. The assault on Quebec was launched on the last day of 1775, in which Montgomery was killed and Arnold was wounded. Bitter fighting persisted in the colonies. In January of 1776, the British set fire to Norfolk, Virginia. In March of 1776, the British was forced to evacuate from Boston. In the South, the rebels won 2 victories. In February 1776, against 15,000 Loyalists, they won at Moores Creek Bridge in North Carolina. In June of 1776, against an invading fleet at Charleston Harbor, the Patriots were also successful. Thomas Paine preaches common sense. Loyalty to the empire was deeply ingrained. Americans continued to believe that they were part of a transatlantic community, and colonial unity was weak. People considered open rebellion dangerous. As late as January 1776, the King's health was still being toasted. People were still saying, "God save the King." Gradually, colonists were shocked into recognizing the necessity to separate. In 1776, Common Sense was written by Thomas Paine. This was one of the most influential pamphlets ever published. He began with the treatise on the nature of government, and argued only lawful states were those that derived their just powers from the consent of the governed. As for the king, he was nothing but the royal brute of Great Britain. 120,000 copies of this pamphlet were sold in 1 week in the colonies. He also tried to convince colonists that the true cause was independence, not reconciliation with Britain. Nowhere in the physical universe did smaller heavenly bodies control larger ones, he argued. So why should the tiny island of Britain control the vast continent of North America? Paine drafted this foundational document, which became the foundation for American independence and American foreign policy, because only with independence could the colonies hope to gain foreign assistance. Paine also called for a republic, which was the creation of a new kind of political society where power flowed directly from the people. In biblical imagery, he argued all government officials, such as governors, senators, and judges, should derive their authority from popular consent. Paine was not first to champion republican government. Classical Greece and Rome show such examples. It was also revived in the 17th century during the Renaissance, and it appealed to British politicians critical of the excessive power in the hands of the king and his advisors. American colonists interpreted royal acts as part of a monarchical conspiracy. Paine's summons to create a republic fell on very receptive ears. New Englanders practiced a kind of republicanism already in their town meetings and annual elections. Most Americans considered citizen virtue fundamental to any successful republican government. In a republic, individuals must sacrifice personal self-interest over the public good, and the collective good of the people mattered more than the private rights and interests of individuals. Paine inspired contemporaries to view America as fertile ground for the cultivation of civic virtue. Not all patriots agreed with Paine's ultra-democratic republicanism. Some favored the republic ruled by a natural aristocracy of talent. They wanted to end all hereditary aristocracy, but not an end to all social hierarchy. They were conservative Republicans who wanted stability of the social order. The contest over American republicanism would continue from this point for the next 100 years. Jefferson's explanation of independence. On June 7, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia moved that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, and the motion was adopted on July 2, 1776, and the motion was a formal declaration of independence by the colonies. An inspirational appeal was needed to enlist other British colonies in the Americas, to invite assistance from foreign nations, and to rally resistance at home. So Congress appointed a committee of people to prepare a formal statement. The task of drafting ultimately fell to Thomas Jefferson, who was qualified for the job. The Declaration of Independence, formally approved by Congress on July 4, 1776, had universal appeal by invoking natural rights of humankind, not just British rights, and argued that because the king had flouted these rights, the colonists were justified in cutting ties. It set forth a long list of presumably tyrannous misdeeds by George III, but the Declaration had a universal impact. This is a picture of King George III of England, who was considered a good man, but a bad king. And we'll continue to talk about the impact of both Thomas Paine's Common Sense and Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence in our classroom discussions.